Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode with myself and Stephen. This time we are talking. It's amazing. Again, it's the second time we've met together, and we've come to this as a joint decision, haven't we?
We have, we
This is
have.
this is good. I quite like the way this works. And this particular episode is about us forgetting what we've already achieved. So in this world of wanting to get things yesterday, almost, we forget where we've come from. We forget what we've achieved. So with that in mind, Stephen, what immediately comes to your mind when I talk about that?
It's such a great subject matter, and I think with mentoring, especially on a one-to-one basis, this comes up quite a lot. And then what I think it's so easy because we live in a world where it's all about what's happening now, right this second, and what we've just done. And there's even a saying, isn't there? What happened yesterday is gone, and we're now in the day. The problem with that statement is we sometimes forget what we've achieved. And because we've forgotten that journey, we're missing out on utilizing that to empower us to be in the moment. And I guess it's, and you hear people sort of say, well, you know, this has happened at the moment, so this is how I'm feeling. But what about last year, the year before, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when you were doing X, Y, Z, how that made you feel? And when you achieved X, Y, Z, that's why you're here now. And I guess it's quite sad sometimes that we forget what we've previously achieved. And because we're constantly being reminded that actually it's about what you do now, what you did before doesn't matter. Actually, it does matter. And actually, it is important because pulling on, I call it my toolkit, pulling on what I did historically helps me on many occasions in the moment because I'm reflecting, I'm thinking, well, what did I do? How did that work? Mistakes are about what you did historically. A mistake isn't about what you're doing right this minute. When we learn through not doing things probably the way that we want to do it, and then we use that experience and we think about it and then we move forward. So I'd like to sort of be a bit controversial because everyone's going, yeah, but what you did, the game that you played last week was a great game, but now we're in this game. But actually, no, the game that I played last week, I did some things very, very well, and that's why it was a good game. So what can I pull from that positive experience, um, and make it a now thing? So that's where I was coming from with it. I'm not sure if that sort of unearths a few things in your mind,
Yeah,
Oliver.
yeah, no, I think that's great because it highlights some of the phrases which I imagine I must have stolen off somebody at some particular point in time. But I coined the phrase: if there's no such thing as failure, there's just the fear of failure. And what I talk about it, I sort of adapt that slightly to there's no such thing as failure. There's only feedback, and there's the feedback that life throws at you every single day. So every time something doesn't quite work out the way you want it to, it's not really a failure.
Yeah,
It's feedback. Life's throwing you feedback, and the only real way of failing is if you ignore that
yeah,
feedback. So yeah, the idea of shutting down stuff that you've done well or poorly in the past just doesn't make sense with me. And I think there's this big focus on being present, which obviously is hugely relevant, but I think often because it's a mantra, it's something that we're told that we need to do, we need to be more present, we don't really know how to do it all the time. But we feel that we must do that, and we can't, well, I can't dwell on the past, or I can't think too much into the future. And there's a risk that you miss out on lots of opportunities. I mean, your sport analogy is perfect, in the fact that you may have had a really good game a week ago or something sporting wise, or you may have just been on a good game on whatever work you were doing. Why? What went well? Have you analysed it? If it's sporting performance, what was different? Maybe you prepped better. Maybe you ate better. Maybe there's potentially 100 different things you could do. Maybe you trained better. All these sorts of things. And in a work context, maybe your head was clearer. I don't know. So the challenge is to think about times of exceptional performance in particular, and what made you work, or what made it work, and what could you replicate? What can you learn from that? So no, absolutely, I completely and utterly agree with that. And I think going from the early point at the introduction, we are so desperate for stuff now. We just live in the now, and we miss on huge amounts of experiences that we should be able to take from. And especially, I know I do, and I'm sure you do with clients. I normally in the early journey go and take them back on a journey into the past to look into things that have gone well, or perhaps that haven't. Now, there's a line I think you can cross, because I think you can go too deep into the past and you can spend too much time there, absolutely. But to just ignore it completely and just want quick results on a daily basis is probably only going to end badly in the main. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this thing, we've talked about planning before, and we've talked about that thinking time. And I think what's really good about thinking about where you've come from and what you've achieved and what's happened is it allows you to pull from that with the thinking to actually benefit where you're going when you're going forward. Often, someone asked me last week when I was at an event, they looked me square in the eye and said, "What's the difference between a mentor and a coach?" But it was like, and we use the word coach sometimes with what we do, but I love the word mentoring. And for me, the big difference for me is mentoring is all about what you're going to do going forward. And it's about where you want to take yourself. And it's about where you see yourself and what do you need to do that. So if that's what mentoring is all about, in order to do that, though, you do need to dip into, well, how have I got to the place that I'm at? And why? Why do I want to go to this other place? So some of that is about reflection. Some of that is about going in the past. And that's why I love mentoring, because you're really thinking about where are you going to, but you still have to delve into where have you come from and your achievements. And on the back of that as well, I think, we don't spend enough time with the thinking about the positive things. And sometimes if you're always just in that moment, it can be quite negative. It can be quite negative because, if something's just happened and it hasn't gone so well and that's all you're thinking about, the way to alleviate that is to think about something positive, and that positive thing that will be something that's happened before that.
Yeah.
So again, for me, the thinking side of it really fascinates me about this. And I hear a lot of people where I'll be talking to them because I know them well and I know where they've come from and what they may have achieved, and they've forgotten it. And another big part of being a mentor sometimes is reminding people. I often say, I'm not going to tell you anything that you don't know. I'm not going to share anything with you that you haven't heard before. And I can more or less guarantee that.
Yeah.
However, what I will do is remind you of something that you'd forgotten, or maybe talk about something in a slightly different way, which engages another part of your mind and soul to think about it in a different way. I don't, it's very rare. There's a reason why discoveries there's not loads and loads of them, because actually when someone does something that's unique, that's never been done before, it's a big deal. However, we can package things up different, we can say things differently, we can remind people, and a lot of mentoring is about reminding people, so what did you do in this situation, what did you pull on? To do that, you have to go in the past. And it's just something that really sort of hit me over the last few weeks, I think, with some of the conversations I've had, that people are almost dragging themselves down because they're constantly in the moment where things aren't going right. And it's about reminding them, well, actually, let's look at the back catalogue. How have you dealt with that before? To use that to drive someone forward.
Yeah, no, I think, totally agree with all of that. And you pick up on another topic, which I certainly will earmark for maybe a future episode, where we talk about coaching, mentoring, training, consultancy. That it's a big cloudy mess, really, to be honest. And a lot of those environments have not the best following and reputation. So I think I'd like us to tackle that at one particular point in the future, to just reassure people what it actually is we do. And I don't really think it's any of those things, and it's all of those things. We help people.
Absolutely.
And it's as simple as that, isn't it?
Yeah, and so much of it is actually, it's led by the person.
Yeah.
Yes, we can throw in our theories, experiences that we've had ourselves, and we can guide people. But fundamentally, a lot of mentoring is about the inner person, how they're feeling, what they want to see, and that changes for each individual. And it is, and I mean, it's a topic for another day. But it just fly in the face of this sort of thing around, to mentor well and to be part of mentorship. You do need to think about where you've come from and what you've achieved before, and your failures.
Yeah.
because let's just be honest about this. A lot of people that come to us for mentoring, the reason they come to us is because they're at a particular point in their life where the needle might have stopped, or in some cases they might feel like they're going backwards. In some cases there's this real fog and haze, and actually they want to sort of make sense of some of the feelings that that's going on inside. And also they might want some direction, some validation, and things like that. So there's lots of different reasons why people come for mentorship or to be mentored. And actually it is a bit murky, and it would be great to focus on that and talk about why are we different. Why do we come at it from a different perspective? And we've talked about this for many hours before, so I think that'd be a great one. But on this subject matter, I do think people give themselves such a hard time, I think, because you might have seen something and you're reacting to it in the moment, and you've forgotten, well, actually 5 years ago you did something really similar and it was a success. So let's focus on that. Let's talk about that. And why was it a success? Okay, so what were the whys? Okay, so how do we take that and move that into current day?
Well, there's two things that come to my mind as well when I think about that. And the first one is myself as a professional coach. I like to think of myself as a professional coach anyway. And I've been doing it for over 7 years now. And when I think back to what I was like in year one, I mean, I wasn't crap, but it was, I don't know. I look back now and I'm like, oh, I used to say stuff like that, did I? Or I used to do things in that way. And they were all well-intentioned, but now, it's different. And I've got lots of experiences. I've trialed different things with different clients. Some have had varying degrees of success. Marketing my business in certain ways. Some bits really work. Some bits I spend a lot of money on stuff and, didn't see a lot for it. But I've learned, and I'm so much better for it now. My clients experience a far improved service than... Apologies to those in years 1 and 2. It wasn't as good. It was still helpful, but it wasn't as good as what we do now. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. And the second thing is this. Probably, I would say it's largely down to, I'm not going to say social media, but media, our ability to see successful people. And when we see successful people, I think we forget how many times those people have fallen over and fallen down. I mean, I can think of many, many people who are successful now that have been bankrupt, have lost their businesses or multiple businesses, or have been struggling to put food on the table and things like that. But we don't see that. And it's not that they don't share it either. It's just that's something that doesn't come up a lot in conversation. So we just see success, and therefore we aren't considering all the things they've gone through. Now, when we take a deep dive, when we maybe read autobiographies or listen to them on podcasts, we begin to understand. But if we're just taking that snapshot, that short little video, for example, we are seeing successful person after successful person. And that's not the truth of it. I bet there is not a single successful person out there who's just won day after day after day. Maybe people have achieved success earlier than many in terms of their age or in terms of the timelines, but ultimately they'll have still made mistakes. And then there's successful people who also have mistakes later down the line, and it's how you respond to that. It's how you take that feedback on, and I think that's a really important point when we talk about that present issue with people living in the now and wanting quick results and massive turnarounds and so forth, which just they don't happen. If you're starting to look at stuff and thinking it can be quick, have a word with yourself, because it's not likely to be the case. And if you think back to past successes at any time in your life, I bet none, or few of them, were quick. They were as a result of effort of some degree, I would imagine. Would you say?
No, absolutely. And again, that's the beautiful thing about looking back in the past to help you move forward, because you remember the struggle, you remember how difficult it was to actually achieve that, you remember that process that you went through. I wonder how many times, I know I do it, I go to do something and sometimes I'm a bit old fashioned and I use pen and paper rather than typing, but how many times do you rewrite, how many times do you screw the paper and throw it in the bin and start again? How many times do you, I don't know, I've done this many times, put a presentation together and then a week ago, and then I would have changed it 5 or 6 times before I actually get to actually doing that. So I do think that sort of reflection and being aware that actually the journey to get to that point, and this is why media in general can be quite dangerous, and that's because we're human. So what we do is we look at something and then we go, well, we're not like that, or we're not doing as well as that, or they're so successful. No one, well, I don't say no one, because I think some people are starting to talk about their failures and talk about that in the media and put up assets that says, well, actually, to do this, I had to get it wrong 20, 30, 40, 50 times to get to that point. You know, it's a little bit like watching the highlights of a football match. You only see the amazing cross that came in and the goal was scored, but how many crosses didn't make it into the penalty box?
Yeah.
You know, and this is why, you know, I'm a big Man City fan. I'm just going to get it out there. Obviously, Norwich City is my second team.
So boring.
But you know,
To be fair, all your life,
I
haven't
grew up
you?
in Manchester,
Yeah.
exactly.
You've been through the
absolutely,
crap.
yeah. And I supported Monastery.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the reasons why Haaland is such a good striker is not just because of his strike rate, but it's because he does the same things over and over and over and over and over again. And in a match, you might get it wrong many, many times, but he never stops trying to do the same thing, and then it scores. But the reality is, we only see the goal.
Yeah.
We don't see the hours of training on a football pitch. You know, the visualization of that goal being scored, visualizing it over and over and over and over and over again. And this is why sometimes media can be a bit of a distraction, because we're only looking at the positive little bit that's really successful. We don't look at all of the bits that get to that. And this is why I think it's really, really important to think about what you've done before, the journey that you've been on, your successes and your failures, but using that past to drive yourself forward. Do not be afraid of it, because actually that did happen to you. That you did do that. You did go through that. And you know, today's message for me is utilize that to help you move forward.
Yeah, perfect. Well, there we go. I was going to say, have you got one final point? And there it is. So utilize that. And for me, I'd say, just to echo that, an exercise I'd love you to do, if you're able to right now at the end of this podcast, is just sit there and think back over the last few years of 3 or 4 times when you've hit what I like to call peak performance, where it's just gone really well for you. And it doesn't have to be work, it just has to be where you've smashed it in life, where you really, really couldn't have been happier with how something went. And then as a second part of that exercise, think why. Why did that work? And I think you'll find that a really beneficial tool. As you can tell, it's a technique that's used by coaches, mentors, whatever you want to call us, people who help people. So anyway, I hope that's been really useful. That's it from me. If you've got any final one-liners you want to add to that?
No, I think that do not forget where you've come from and what you've achieved and how you can use that to move yourself forward.
Excellent. Brilliant. I hope you've all enjoyed that episode, and we'll see you at the next one.
Bye for now.